Hello, everyone. Week 2, here we go. So week 1, which is kind of an introduction week, but week 2 is when we're really going to start diving into the stuff. Not only do you have a live speech this week, but like I said, we are going to be diving into the material. We're going to go over our first chapter in our textbook. So I'm just going to briefly go over some important content that I pulled from the textbook. I will record this video, upload it to Canvas, and for accessibility purposes, I will also post the PowerPoint slides as well without audio. Like I said, I'm pulling I think probably the most important stuff from the chapter, but you are still responsible for reviewing and reading the chapter. It's not very long. It's not even, well, I don't think it's boring, but it's not even very dense. It's very manageable, very easy to digest. So go ahead and read the chapter along with watching this video and going over the PowerPoints, because sometimes I do pull some quizzes, quiz questions from the material that we don't go over in the PowerPoints, just my way of making sure that you're reading. So just an FYI about that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me. Okay. So this chapter 1 is the first look at interpersonal communication. So it's like your introduction chapter, obviously, chapter 1. So we're going to get our feet wet with some of the principles and theories before we really dive into the specifics. Okay. So why do we communicate? Communication, the company of others, it's one of our most basic human needs. We need to be around people. We need to be in relationships with people. And we use communication to fulfill the needs in our lives. Relationships, situations fulfill our needs, but how we build those relationships and how we satisfy and how we build such good situations, we need to use communication. And you'll see in this little pyramid I created, there are different aspects of what we need. There's physical needs, social needs, identity needs, and then of course, practical goals, which I break down further in this little chart that I created. So the book chapter does really break it down about what I mean in this little chart. For like example, physical needs, our physical health is impacted. There's actual studies that show that people with successful relationships, healthy, successful, happy relationships, live longer, experience less heart problems. There's so many health issues connected to those who have possibly a bad relationship, unhealthy relationship, or don't have any relationships. As it says in this column, no relationships equals poor health. Positive relationships equals better health. Identity needs, this is our only way to learn who we are, and how we learn who we are is based on the questions that we ask, the environments that we're in. We need communication to express what we need, but to ask, where are we from, to express, I don't like this, but I like this. With no communication, we don't really have a sense of ourselves. And if we don't have a sense of ourselves, then we can't express what we need to others, which goes on to social needs. Building positive relationships makes people satisfied with life. But we need to use communication to tell our friends, I'm feeling really sad right now, and this is why. We need communication to tell our significant other, I really feel like we haven't been connecting. Can we do something different? Positive relationships might be the most important source of life satisfaction. And then there's practical goals. The textbook says, communication allows us to get others to behave in ways that we want. Now, that might sound kind of shady, but it really isn't when you think about it in practical career ways. For example, that I gave in this chart, how do you negotiate for a raise? Let's say you're up for a promotion and you want to negotiate for a raise. You're going to use communication to state your argument. And all those who are in customer service, how do you calm down an angry customer? You don't yell at them, or I wouldn't recommend that. But the only way to calm down an angry customer is to talk to them, is to use your communication skills to calm them down. Communication skills are essential in virtually every career. This is why practical goals is listed. But what is communication? So communication is using messages to generate meetings. I put this very big official definition of interpersonal communication, but pretty much it's a transactional process between different participants. But there's going to be overlapping environments and the way we create meetings. All of this is involved in communication. But according to the GIF, so what is that? What are you trying to say? What am I trying to tell you all? Before, researchers viewed communication as a very linear model. That meant there was one person, there was two people. One person was trying to tell a message, send a message to the other person, and there was noise around these two people. So the example I'm giving right now, I am the professor, I'm a sender. I'm putting together this presentation. I'm encoding the presentation. That's what it is. I'm trying to create a message and I post it on Canvas. That is the channel so that you, the students, you are the messenger, can receive the message that I was trying to encode. But you're also receiving this while you're at home, surrounded by family, friends, pets, and other things that need your attention. That's all the noise. So before, researchers viewed communication very linear in that way. But now we realize it's a very transactional process. We view it very differently. So some of the key differences is that each person is a communicator capable of sending and receiving messages. So the example that I gave you, I'm the professor, I created a presentation to send a message, post it on Canvas so you can receive it. That's it. When actually, no, that's not it. What if you have questions? What if you don't understand something? What if I said something incorrectly and I have to go back and retract what I said? We're going to be going back and forth communicating. So that's where you see these arrows. We're constantly going back and forth in the communication process. And of course, noise is still there. And keep in mind, noise isn't like physical noise. It can be the things that are distracting you. What if you're trying to watch this presentation around lunchtime and you're hungry and you're focused on your growling stomach versus this presentation? That is noise. And also another thing that we have to be mindful about with the transactional communication model is that we have to be mindful of environments. My environment is going to be different from your environment. So like, for example, and I gave in this presentation, person A might belong to one ethnic group while person B might belong to another. Even me, the professor, I'm, academic professor, that is my environment, but I'm trying to communicate with you, all of my students. Not only are you just students, but you could be parents, you could be married, you could have multiple jobs, you're still going through this pandemic. We all have different environments and situations, and we all have to be mindful of that when we're communicating. But there's more. So we already looked at different definitions and approaches to communication, but we need to know the principles of interpersonal communication. And what those principles mean is what communication can and can't accomplish. So these are the main communication principles. Like I said, the textbook really dives into explicit details. I just pulled the main ideas. I really highly recommend you go in and read the more explicit details of these principles. But the communication principles the textbook describes is that communication can be intentional and unintentional, which means that's planned and unplanned. So this PowerPoint, this video, I'm recording it, I planned it in my schedule. That is intentional. But some of the facial expressions, or maybe some of the, I misspoke, or I said a word incorrectly, or you're in an argument with someone and your face says something, that's unintentional, that's unplanned. With communication, it's impossible not to communicate. We are always communicating. We're communicating with words, emotions, and facial expressions, always communicating. And communication, another principle is communication is unrepeatable. You can't repeat the same moment the same event over again. So even, let's say this is COMM 2 for the spring semester. I'm going to re-record this video for my fall semester students, but I'm not going to be saying the same things when I re-record in the fall. I'm not going to be wearing the same thing. I'm going to look different. My environment might be different. We can't repeat the same event. So communication is unrepeatable. And also communication is unreversible. And I said it, I put it in my PowerPoint. It sounds cheesy, but you can't go back in time and take back what you said or did. That's why, and we talk about it later on the semester, communication in our interpersonal communications, when you're fighting with your loved ones, your friends, sometimes we say something out of turn, we should have bite our tongue. You can't take that back. Once you say it, once you text it, once you tweet it, it's out there. And even if you delete a tweet, everything on social media is forever. Even if you apologize to someone like, oh, I'm sorry, I said that bad thing, that person is always going to remember it. And then finally, communication has a content and relational dimension. So this can get a little tricky. So a content dimension is information being explicitly discussed. So where someone texts you and say, hey, you want to do something? And you say, oh, I'm busy tonight, maybe some other time. That's when you're explicitly saying something. The relational dimension is how you feel about maybe that person or the information. So for example, what if that person who says, hey, do you want to do something tomorrow night? And you're like, oh, I'm busy. What if that person, is maybe your best friend, or maybe someone you have a crush on? Or what if it's just that old high school friend that you're not really interested in catching up with? So, our communication has a content and relational dimension. So some misconceptions. So we've gone over the principles, the communication principles, but now we go over the misconceptions, what we think about communication, but isn't really true. So we think more communication is always better. That is not true. For example, what if have you ever heard of someone or your best friend, they're in a fight with their significant other and they're constantly texting them and you're telling them like, stop, like just let it go, take a breather, take a day. Sometimes constantly communicating is not always better. Sometimes you need to take a step back. Sometimes you need to watch your words. And speaking of that, meanings are not in words. Sometimes saying something is not the same thing as communicating, because meanings can be in nonverbal communication or how that message comes across. Just because I'm saying something, that doesn't mean you're going to take it the way I intend it. Meanings are always going to be in the nonverbal, in our expressions, and also how you take the message. Another misconception is successful communication doesn't always involve shared understanding. Okay. So I gave a good example right here. What if your best friend asked you if you liked their new tattoo, but you didn't like their new tattoo? To maintain the friendship, you're probably going to say, oh yeah, I think it's cool, or hey, it's your body, like you do you. You're not going to tell your best friend, no, I absolutely hate it. Or you might, I don't know, depending on your relationship. Everyone has different relationships. But usually the misconception is always being honest. You always have to tell the honest, always have to be communicating the honest truth. But sometimes you need to watch what you say in order to keep the relationship. And then finally, a communication misconception is that communication is going to solve all of our problems. It's not. What if, I gave an example, what if someone called your dog ugly and then gave you a list of reasons why? Is that going to make you feel good? I mean, they communicated with you. They were like, hey, here's what I think. Is that going to improve your relationship? Most likely not. So communication is not always going to solve all of our problems, unfortunately. And that's it. That is, like I said, the main important stuff I wanted to pull from chapter 1. You were still responsible for reviewing chapter 1. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now. You're still going to be responsible for reviewing chapter 1. Go over the stuff that I didn't go over in this PowerPoint. No use in rereading. The only things I'll probably recommend that you reread of the things that I pulled out is probably the communication principles and misconceptions, okay? But I'm going to go ahead and upload this video to Canvas, and I will also upload these slides without audio to Canvas as well. If you have any questions or concerns, go ahead and post them in our week 2 module Q&A board, but you can also email me and you can also send me a message as well. Thank you.